Welcome to the Choose FI Radio Podcast, Episode 21, The Pillars of FI.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, we're back. And today, as usual, we're talking about financial independence. You know, this thing, it's really easy, but it's also incredibly difficult. It's simple, yet incredibly complicated. It can be distilled into a couple bullet points or expounded into a library of books and hundreds of new websites every day. But we're going to try and go through some of the bullet points today in this episode, which we're calling the Pillars of FI. So Brad's here with me in the studio today. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm glad to be here as always. This should be a fun one. I think the Pillars of FI is a really good overview podcast that we can really touch on, you know, the main aspects of financial independence. And hopefully we captured as many of the important ones as, you know, as we could come up with. And, you know, as always, we love the feedback from the audience. So if you guys have any that we missed, you know, send it to us in an email, feedback@choosefi.com. Or, you know, leave a comment on this post. It'll be at choosefi.com/021.
You know, this episode is a high level picture. And I think it's cool that we're doing it as episode 21 instead of episode 1, because so many of these we've actually fleshed out now. And we'll kind of point you to those specific episodes as we go. But we're going to go kind of high level. We're going to pull a couple of these pillars out. And then at the same time, while we're doing it, we'll try to point you to the ones that we've already done so you can go and get more information about each one of those. And then we'll also tell you when the other ones will be coming up. So, I was listening to this podcast the other day, this personal finance podcast, and I'm not going to name it, but they were kind of going through some basic, you know, kindergarten stuff about just doing a budget and kind of, you know, why debt is bad and all that sorts of thing. But I love our podcast and I love our community. I love the ideas that we're really going through one by one because it's next level stuff. You know, it's essentially the guaranteed path to wealth. There's no really unknowns or uncertainties built into this. We're not building a bunch of really high flying techniques that only the select few has access to. Almost anybody can use the techniques that we're talking about. And we're just trying to show you how to get started. And so when the feedback comes to us and basically says, I've listened to 17 episodes and I've made one actionable step from each one of those, you know, your life is going to be so much better as a result of those changes that you've made. This isn't like sending you to go get the lottery ticket or trying to send you down some rabbit hole where you don't know what's happening. The math works for you, as we say over and over again. So today what we're doing is just going through kind of one by one some of these things that people in the FIRE community, they all have in common. They've done these in one shape or form. And frankly, you know, after this episode, we could probably all just stop, right? Nothing else needs to be said about any one of these where it's all over. And obviously that's not true. But today is just a fun look at what those individual levers actually look like. And then hopefully pointing you in the direction where you can get more about each one of those if that's something that you're interested in following. So Brad, you ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So these are in no particular order. But number one, we thought we would talk about low-cost index fund investing.
Yeah, this is a crucial one. There's no doubt about it. We talked about this with Jim Collins in episode 19, and you and I talked about it way back in episode 3. We believe that low-cost index fund investing is the absolute way to go with investing in the stock market and growing your wealth over a period of decades. Sure, there's a small chance that you could outperform the market with your own stock picking genius, or maybe you found the one mutual fund investor who actually can outperform over the course of 4 or 5 decades. But the likelihood of that is extremely, extremely slim. And you're going to pay a significant amount in fees for that potential, right? Which is a very, very small likelihood of that positive outcome. So for us, the more prudent choice is invest in the market, invest in, in the case of VTSAX, the total US stock market index fund, you're buying a tiny little piece of every US company, every publicly traded US company. And you're paying a tiny minuscule fee to do so. With Vanguard, it's 0.05. And, so we've seen Charles Schwab came out with an even smaller expense ratio. So this, in our opinion, is the absolute best way to invest. And this does seem to be a pillar of FI that you've heard over and over again. Again, the mad scientist, when he was on in episode 17, he said that, when he first started investigating FI, he thought for sure that through the course of, tons of research and work that he could outperform the market. And he very quickly came to the realization that that was not the lever that he wanted to pull. For him, it was tax optimization, and we will talk about that later. But, that just goes to show that, even the smartest people around, even someone like Brandon, just realized that it was a fool's errand to try to outperform the market.
I think it always takes a little bit of humility to come to that point, because I think part of it is just as a person, maybe as a guy, I don't know, but you just feel like I'm going to learn the secrets to beat this thing. And it actually is probably what holds you back, because you're very quick to acknowledge your successes and marginalize your failures. But it's crazy to me that what probably seems like the most complex thing is actually one of the simplest. It's probably, out of all these things that we talk about, my investing strategy is probably the thing that I put the least amount of thought into. I'm just doing low cost index fund investing. I've done it. So a lot of initial research. I've made my decision on that. I don't second guess it. There's no other real information that I need there. I'm putting my stuff in Vanguard, whenever possible, low cost index funds. And then I just don't watch it. And I fully expect, essentially what is it that you always like to tell me? Wake up in 40 years and ask for your cardiologist. Because, it's just, there are other tools that we're going to talk about that you will use. But from an investing perspective, when there are hundreds of TV shows dedicated to it, hundreds or thousands of magazines dedicated to it, stock tips, Kramer and Mad Money magazine and all these other things, all these flashy bells and whistles, I just ignore it. I'm just doing low cost index fund investing. And it's just the simplest thing in the world. And we can just move on. I mean, really, it is just that simple.
Yeah, agreed. And just an addendum to this pillar is actually not timing the market. It kind of goes hand in hand with low cost index fund investing. Is, you can't outperform the market in all likelihood, and you cannot time the market. It is almost impossible to do. And I mean, you have to be right. You have to be right twice. You have to be right on the selling side and on the buying side. And it's just so unlikely. So, again, our strategy, which works for us both mathematically, we believe, and psychologically, certainly, is to just keep pumping money into low cost index funds as often as we possibly can. Don't, look at the market. Don't, like Brandon from the Mad Scientist joked on his episode. He, looks for the fund price to be his hockey number or something crazy like that. We let our brains screw us up. And this is an instance where you just can't. Just put it on autopilot, let it roll, and, wake up in 40 or 50 years and have more money than you could possibly imagine.
All right, the second pillar that we're going to go over today is affordable housing. So this is one that when you screw it up, it's really, really hard to dig your way out.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it is a huge line item in your budget. And, buying intelligently or renting, as it may be, is just so crucial. I mean, I know we talked about this with Chad Carson on house hacking. And that's something that Jonathan, you and I both wish we could go back and do over if we could be, 22 again. Definitely. Without a doubt. But, there are ways to be intelligent with your housing, and just like everything with FI, and we will talk about this at the end of the episode, it's just thinking a little bit differently. All right. So, this is not to say that someone in a high cost of living area, someone in New York City or San Francisco, can't pursue FI. We're not arguing that at all. It's not, move to Richmond, Virginia or Wichita, Kansas, and that's the only way to reach FI. It's being a little bit smarter and just being cognizant of where your money's going. And I think, housing is certainly a huge aspect of that. That might mean if you live in one of those high cost of living areas, think differently and get a roommate, or rent out a room or something like that, or maybe go slightly further away from your job and find something that's a little more reasonable. That might go against, what Mr. Money Mustache would say, which is, live close to your job and bike. But we're not making any kind of proclamation here on what you have to do precisely. It's just think a little bit differently. And I know, in my own life, we lived, my wife Laura and I lived on Long Island, New York, our entire lives. And, we came to the point where we were getting married, and we realized that we were going to have a very difficult life there on Long Island. And that's even as, two CPAs making a decent living. It just wasn't practical for us just because the housing prices were crazy. I mean, our friends were spending $400,000+ on fixer uppers with $12,000 a year taxes. I mean, that's crazy. And, our entire mortgage payment now, including principal, interest, and taxes, are less than what our friends pay just in taxes.
Wow.
And that's no joke. I mean, and for living in one of the nicest parts of the Richmond metro area in a 4-bedroom house with a yard. I mean, this was a tough decision that we had to make. But sometimes pursuing 5 requires tough decisions. So, that's kind of my more philosophical look at housing. And I'd be curious to hear what you think, Jonathan.
I agree with you. So I think the conversation is different in the fire community. When you go and you're trying to, let's just say you're just average Joe Schmo and you're looking for your first house. The house that you buy is just a function of your income. You go to the bank and they say, okay, you make $100,000 a year, you can get approved for a $600,000 mortgage. Okay, great, right? In our community, like I could get a much larger mortgage than what I have currently. I could afford, and I say afford with quotes around it, I could afford a much larger or much more expensive home than I'm currently in. But that's not the way our brains are wired because we're pursuing fire. It's a function of the math. And you can go much deeper with this. In this particular episode, we're just talking about affordable housing as a function of, as a tool that allows you to reach fire faster. I think we're going to do it episode 23, which is going to be 2 episodes from now. We are going to actually dig into renting versus buying. It's a huge debate on the internet, especially in the fire community. Jim Collins and Go Curry Cracker and Christy from Millennial Revolution are heavily in the rent camp. And there are plenty of other people that are in the buy camp. And we're going to kind of play devil's advocate because both Brad and I are homeowners, but Brad is a firm believer in renting and I'm a firm believer in whatever the math says. But at the same time, I get the emotional connection to the home. And so we're going to have fun with that episode and go through all their arguments. And then we're going to go through the straw men and then just kind of come up with some sort of answer. But that's coming in episode 23. But for the sake of today and this little short analysis, my big thing is just the math. And you do not want your home to slow you down on your progression to FI. It should be somewhat comparable to what you would get renting, and you should get some additional benefits, I would imagine, if you're doing that. And all that goes out the window when you try to get the biggest home that you can afford based on what the bank tells you. It's just ridiculous. So that goes back to Brad and I did this episode the other day about the entry level middle class lifestyle. That I believe that was episode 20. The entry level, yeah, episode 20, and we talked a little bit about what that looks like. But I am perfectly happy with the entry level middle class lifestyle because my primary goal is not to have a paid off McMansion, but it is to reach FI and fire. So, that's kind of my own personal analysis on it. Anything you want to add to that, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hear commonly that, home ownership is, your biggest investment and, the American dream and all this kind of stuff. And, what we would say is it's just math. And for people like us, our home is not our biggest investment. In all likelihood, it's our 401k balance or our, whatever balance you have sitting there in Vanguard. So, don't get thrown off by, what popular culture says. It comes down to math in most cases. And, we're just asking you guys to be smart with what really is going to be the biggest line item in your budget.
So, and one of the things that's really interesting about the show, this is everything that Brad and I think about on a regular basis about how we're going to get to FI. I mean, we are going to get to FI. Brad's probably 2 to 3 years ahead of me on this track, but he's going to be there very, very quickly. And I'm going to be there right on his coattails trying to get in right behind him. And these are the things that we're doing to get there. And if you kind of follow us and you buy into a few of these items that we're talking about, you're going to be there either before us or right there behind us. And so, look at your housing, look at your investing techniques. And then the next one right behind housing has to be car ownership. And how much value do you place in the type of car you drive? So, Brad, how do we want to start with this one?
All right, this is a perfect timing because we're actually going to have a real in-depth episode on car ownership and the ultimate cost of car ownership next Monday. So that'll be episode 22. So definitely stay tuned for that. So we don't want to waste too much time here on this, but car ownership is another large line item that many people are a family spending $400 a month per car in many cases for a new car or a lease car. So I mean you're talking big bucks when, especially, it's $800 for a family with 2 cars plus, then you throw in insurance and gas and all this stuff. I mean, you're well over $1,000 a month for many regular middle-class families. And I mean, that is just crazy talk to me. We do not believe in buying new cars, and we certainly don't believe in leasing cars. That is really not a smart strategy at all. In my perfect world, it's buy a very reliable used or lightly used car where all the major depreciation has already come off of it. Let some other sucker pay for the first couple of years of depreciation, and you reap the benefits of a car that could last for 15 or 20 years and really only have to deal with a tiny portion of the depreciation. So I know in my case we did something similar with that with my wife's Toyota Highlander. We bought it 4 years used, but it actually only had 27,000 miles on it, which was fantastic. And, we got it for basically half off what the current sticker price was at the time for a brand new Highlander. So literally 50% of the purchase price, it only had 27,000 miles on it. And we still have it. It's coming up on 10 years. And the thing is going strong. There's no reason to believe that it won't last forever at this point. And, I actually bought, when I was basically fresh out of college, bought a new car at the time. I didn't know quite as well, but it was a Honda Civic. It was only like $14,000 or $15,000, and I still have it, 14 years later. So, that's how we do it with cars. And I think really the larger message is avoid new cars if at all possible. So, Jonathan, throw it over to you for your thoughts.
I am horrible with cars. This has always been the bane of my, financial life. I'm just so bad at it. But the conclusion that I've come to is, and I've never actually purchased a brand new car in my life. So that's my little win in this. But I think like for me, more and more, as I look at the math more and more, I'm just thinking, if you can just be satisfied with that at least 5-year-old car that's got relatively low miles, it's already taken the depreciation hit that Brad talked about. And so you're just not throwing $100 bills out the window every single week in depreciation. Those add up. Those add up to real dollars over time. And so I think, more and more the common theme that I've seen is get a gas sipper. That makes sense. We can all visualize gas cost. Get a gas sipper that's 5 years old. Get one so it's gas sipper, meaning gets great gas mileage. Get one that's easy to repair. So lots of old parts out there. If they were to actually need a repair, it's not an Audi where you're going to have something imported, or a Land Rover or something crazy like that, where just the single part is going to cost you triple what it would in a Honda. And then, because if you want the best of both worlds, get something with a fair amount of storage space. So like one of these Ocano hatchbacks. So next week, we're going to actually do the true cost of car ownership, the ultimate guide to the true cost of car ownership. And we are going to go through the high level math. So big picture, what that will save you over a period of 20 to 40 years. And then low level, what is the cost of depreciation, maintenance, taxes? I mean, on an annual basis, what is your car choice actually costing you? And then with those two sets of information, you can then go and analyze it with your cars, and you can figure out exactly how much you're losing, based on your current setup. And then if you made a decision to switch to something else, you can pretty easily figure out what that might look like. And I think there's just a very, very fraction of people, very small fraction of people that actually win with cars, meaning they buy it at one price, they drive it for 3 years, and even after they take the small amount of depreciation, they end up selling it and making enough profit to offset some of their other cost. That is a rare breed, and I am not one of them. But I can tell you, average Joe Schmo that just goes out and buys something brand new off the street, their car is probably costing them anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 a year. Just realistically and we'll go through that math and take a look at it. But I mean, it can get really, really absurd when you dig down into it. So that's going to be a really cool episode, and it's helping me. So based on that episode that's coming up, I actually have kind of a game plan going forward, so that even if I don't win, with quotes, I at least don't lose as badly. Cars are something that are going to cost you money if you make the decision, and you'll see after you go through that episode why so many people talk about bikes. It really does make sense. Whether or not that's feasible for everybody or not, you can at least understand from a mathematics perspective how powerful riding a bike would be. All right, next. So that was pillar number 3. So for pillar number 4, we're going to take a look at the food budget. Brad and I talked about this. This was episode 7, where congratulations, America, you're fat and broke, and also episode 10, where we did Skinny Waist Fat Wallet, which was a look at frugal food and fitness. So we really went into some depth there, but crushing your food bill is critical. And I think more and more I've come to just settle on Brad's magical number of $2 per person per meal.
Yeah, I mean, that has definitely worked for us as far as, our approximate dinner cost. And, usually breakfast and lunch will be a little cheaper actually at that, but that's kind of like our guideline for dinner. And it was interesting that Jeremy from Go Curry Cracker had the exact same figure in his mind. And I actually also found it pretty cool that he thought about it in the exact same terms. It was, that per person per meal cost. And, we've definitely talked about this before. Eating out is prohibitively expensive. It just is. I mean, when you're talking about, going to a restaurant, buying a $10 entree, buying, a drink, or even a soda for a couple bucks, or a beer for, $5 or $6, and then you're, in on tax and tip. I mean, it's $20 plus per person. And, in all likelihood, you're getting dramatically less healthy food, to put it mildly. So yeah, as we said, skinny waist, fat wallet by eating at home and saving money and just being a little bit smarter. So, just like a lot of stuff with FI, it comes down to just thinking a little differently and being a little bit smarter. So, if you have a game plan for your food and for your meals for the week, sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra time. This is kind of what we talked about with that quote from the guy Jocko Willink, which is discipline equals freedom. So this is a perfect example. It doesn't mean like discipline, like sit and study for 10 hours and work your tail off and then you do well. It's not that. It's setting up a framework in life that makes your life dramatically easier. That's what discipline equals freedom is all about. And, for us, this is a perfect example with our food, which is, on the weekend, Laura sits down and plans out basically 2 meals that she's going to cook that week. Sometimes it's only 1 because, she knows it's going to make a ton of leftovers. Always she plans a meal to be two nights. So it'll be, she'll cook it on Monday, both of us will eat, and then we'll have it again on Wednesday. And then in all likelihood, there'll be another meal's worth of leftovers at it. So 5-person meals from 1 meal that she cooked. And I mean, that's fantastic. That's essentially 3 nights when Laura throws in her 1 slice of pizza, and then we have 3 nights from 1 time of her cooking. So, that is an instance where discipline equals freedom. You sit down, you plan it out for 10 minutes, and instead of scrambling every day and running to get fast food or running to get this or that, you just have it set. So it's cheaper dramatically. And it's much more psychologically satisfying that you just know what your plan is. So you don't have to deal with those impulse buys, when you go to the food store and see the $10 per person per meal prepared food. You just have it set. So yeah, Jonathan, what about you as far as food goes?
So this is actually a great way for me to announce that I came to the end of that program and I went from 198 pounds down to 173 pounds. I think now I'm back up to 175-ish. So I did drop 25 pounds, didn't quite hit my 30. I'm sorry, guys. Reality hit me at some point. And I think part of it was I went up to the, it's always good to have an excuse lined up when you don't totally hit your goals. That's a great life hack tip right there. Just have 1 or 2, teed up just in case you need them. But when we went to 2 days days a week publishing it really cut down on my exercise. Now, I didn't get as much exercise in, but I crushed it on the diet perspective. I didn't cheat. I think I cheated one time the entire 12 weeks, which is unheard of for me. And I stuck with the one fast day a week. I told you I was going to do that. I got really good at going to bed on an empty stomach. And that one day a week, I just did a total fast. And yeah, I mean, I was dropping 1 to 2 pounds. Occasionally went up to 3 pounds a week. There were some weeks where I didn't lose any, that were kind of mixed in there. And it was fantastic. And a couple things happened as I was doing that. I kind of just reprogrammed my brain to get in touch with the foods I was eating again. So I started noticing extraordinarily different levels of energy just based on the breakfast I had. Whereas when I was just eating whatever I wanted all the time, you kind of lose that. You just kind of feel like garbage all the time. But after 12 weeks of really eating very clean, high quality foods, you just feel alert. You feel mentally awake. Occasionally you'd have cravings, but they are very controllable. And then when I would screw it up, like the other day, I had some Cheetos the other day for the first time, and I just felt horrible. And it just kind of tells you, your body gets used to these different types of garbage food and accepts it, but it just slows you down more and more. And if you get back and you're just eating this clean, high quality food, especially over a period of like 12 weeks, it really does make an extraordinary difference in your energy levels and how alert you are, just your overall satisfaction. You get enjoyment out of a lot of things. So overall, it was an incredible success. 25 pounds, 12 weeks. I decided I'm just going to keep on going because it's really not that difficult. I think I'm just going to kind of keep on doing it. And essentially, it's not really adding a whole lot to my life. I really didn't exercise very much at all. I didn't run a single time. I stopped altogether about halfway through. I really even stopped walking for the most part just because my life got so busy with work and other stuff, and this podcast probably in particularly. And then the one thing I did is I stole Brad's goal with the pull-ups, and I got my pull-ups up to 50 pull-ups. So
how many pull-ups?
Yeah, I crushed it. I can do 50 pull-ups now.
In one set?
Yeah, man. Yep.
Wow.
I took your goal and ran with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was always pretty good at them, but when I heard you say 15, and then it ended up being like my one exercise that I actually do. So I'd literally get home, shirt and tie from work, about to go to bed. Let me go and do one set of pull-ups. It'll be the only physical exercise I'm going to get today. And I probably started with a baseline of like 12 to 15, somewhere in that range. And yeah, just kept on pushing it. So I'm up to 50 now. That was my win right there. But overall, I feel great, man. Feel absolutely fantastic. And I think I'm just going to keep on going. If I lose like 1 pound a week for the next, several weeks, I'll be very satisfied with this. So
nice. Yeah, that's incredible progress. 25 pounds in 12 weeks. So good work. And obviously you saved a whole boatload of money over what, the regular middle class Joe Schmo is doing. So yeah, good for you.
Yeah, I think I went out to eat one time at Chipotle over that 12-week period, and I really didn't feel like I missed anything either. So we'll do some cookouts in the spring. I do love actually cooking really good foods, but I'm really in it for the social component, which works so well with the FI space. I mean, FI is all about community. It's all about building these relationships. And instead of moving something just from a restaurant where you're just going through the motions and actually making it a community-based thing, maybe you're doing a barbecue in the backyard. That's where I get the most enjoyment out of. So kind of frugal analogs there. Anyways, that was off topic, but you guys deserved it. I know I had told you about it back in February and March, and we're obviously at the end now. So that's where I'm at. And yeah. So thanks for all y'all's support and questions, and we'll just keep going from here. Pillar number 5, tax optimization. I think this is, of everything we do, this is the sexiest thing, which only in the fire community would you call tax optimization sexy, but it really is the coolest thing that we dig down and break down for people. And there's so many techniques that our community has figured out that nobody outside of this space was talking about. Like, you're never going to hear Dave Ramsey talking about capital gains harvesting. You're never going to hear him talk about the Roth conversion ladder. You're just not going to get the stuff on Susie Orman. But in the fire community, we have these really cool advanced techniques to never pay taxes again. And I'm just looking at our episodes, and we have done so many on them now. So we started with 17, which was Mad Fientist, where we really went through the Roth conversion ladder. And then in episode 18 with Go Curry Cracker, we went through capital gains and losses, and specifically harvesting those. And then upcoming, we're going to be going into some real depth with Wealthy Accountant, taking a look at just crushing it on all sorts of other little deductions and special techniques that you can use. And he's already got them all listed over on his blog. We're going to try and turn those into a story on our podcast. We're really excited about that. So, and then in our Friday roundups, we went into even more depth. So if you want more information on how you can use the Roth conversion ladder or how you can use capital gains harvesting, 2 incredibly powerful techniques that you can use to never pay taxes again, especially in your FI life, that's already been set up for you. So one of the things that we do is we use the podcast to get this information turned into a story. And while you could certainly listen to our podcast starting from episode 1, marathoning it, and coming now to episode 22 or 23. And you'll be very happy with the story that tells. A year from now, this information is still going to be here, and there's going to be a lot more added onto it. And so when you're ready to start taking this specific class on crushing your taxes, you can go to choosefi.com and you can go specifically to our tax optimization page, and you can dig through all of those content, all that content individually on an as needed basis. It's going to be there for you. That's the idea. Take all of this stuff, find it, collate it, put it together in a place that makes sense and that you can grab it and apply it to your life on an as needed basis. And when we've designed this webpage, that's how we designed it, to really set that up and make it easy to find.
And yeah, just final word for me on the tax optimization standpoint is, Jonathan is one of the big episodes we had was with Millionaire Educator, actually, on tax optimization. And really the biggest key and the biggest takeaway is to max out all of your tax deferred accounts. So your 401k, if you're a public employee and you have a 403b, 457, your IRAs, we want to, as Jonathan said, we want to never pay taxes again. And we think that using some of these advanced strategies, like the Roth IRA conversion ladder and the capital gain harvesting, that we can effectively really outsmart the system. And that's what FI is all about to some degree. It's about knowing the rules and maximizing them as much as possible. So, whereas the conventional wisdom is max out your Roth IRA, right? That's what you hear all the time. That is not the general advice from the FI community. It's max out the tax deferred accounts, because we think you can get that money out on the back end without paying any tax on it at all, or at the most a very, very small amount. So you can literally never pay taxes on that money, period. So locking yourself into a Roth IRA now and paying the taxes now is not good advice for the FI community. So, again, that's just looking at a problem a little bit differently.
That's awesome. I'm glad you rounded that out. And honestly, Millionaire Educator, to me, he is one of my all-time favorite episodes because he is the first person that got me thinking about taxes differently. I mean, he crystallized the concept of creating these buckets and then filling these buckets and treating it as a game. How can you live your life within these margins that have been set up by our federal government? But if you can do it inside those buckets, inside those brackets, then it just gives you all this other freedom. And so the story he tells with that episode transformed the way I will forever look at taxes. I'm not saying it was the final note on that, but if you implement the tools that he talked about in that episode, and I think that's episode 13, the unfair FI advantage of teachers, if you take that episode and use that as a starting place, all these other tools become available to you. It really is one of the perfect episodes to start with. Okay, guys, pillar number 6, we think that's college hacking. We realize that some of you already passed that point, but it still affects you because you're probably gonna have kids at some point. And for those of you that are listening to this earlier, then maybe you still have time to implement it. But in general, college hacking, this is being focused at the parents for the kids. This is a second generation fire conversation. Brad and I are gonna patent that. I don't think anybody has secondgenerationfire.com. If they do, you just got a free plug. But second generation fire is the future. I mean, can you imagine that child starting at the age of 18 with these tools under his belt, maybe graduating college debt free, maybe the parent implementing all these tax optimization strategies for them, teaching them how it works, giving them these tools when they go into their 20s. I mean, you learning this in your 30s is powerful. You learning this in your 40s, 50s, 60s is powerful. It can change your life. But if you learned it in your teens, if you're a parent and you're teaching your kids this stuff, this is a game changer. Any single one of these is a game changer. But together, with great power comes great responsibility, right? These are superpowers when you apply them to a 20-year-old.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And what's funny, the second generation fire, I actually got an email from Jim Collins yesterday. I didn't tell you this, Jonathan. He was listening to a bunch of our old podcasts, and he literally wrote an email that just said, second generation fire, great line. Love it. So that was really cool. I know you coined that phrase, so a little kudos to you there.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm definitely setting someone up. Someone has probably already reserved that domain name after listening to it at this point, and I've definitely set you up for success. But yeah, enjoy.
But yeah, as far as college hacking goes, this is something we're going to talk about certainly in great detail over the next year or years, because it is such a big line item in people's budgets. And we had an article on dual enrollment where you can start earning college credits in high school and really cut the number of years that you have to actually go to a 4-year college. There are ways to go do something unconventional, not go to the best college you can get into, but go places where you can get scholarships, or even better, go to a community college for 2 years, and then, make sure, again, the rules. That's, we always come back to these pillars, right? Which is what we're talking about here, which is knowing the rules and maximizing them, right? So if you know for certain that your child can go to X community college, around the corner from you, and can take all these courses and have them transferred to a top tier public university in your state, well, I mean, that's going to save you essentially 2 years worth of college. I mean, because community college is extraordinarily inexpensive. Then we have Sunwoo Lee coming out with his article on hacking the FAFSA, which we're going to detail in depth here. So, I mean, there are ways, especially for people in the FI community who once they're in FI, don't quote unquote have a lot of income, right? We have a lot of assets, but not a huge amount of incoming income. Well, there are ways that we believe that you can hack college aid and potentially get any college for free or pretty close to free. So this is a real big item, and that's why we included it in the pillars of FI.
And that financial freedom clock starts when you hit zero. And the thing that keeps people from getting to zero faster is the student debt. So that's why this is such a big play. Let's let our next generation, let's try to get to the point where they are starting from broke or starting from zero, in their teens instead of in their 30s. So anyways, enough said there. That's one of those we'll constantly be coming back to. If you want more information on that, you can check out our episode, I believe it's 15 with Justin from Root of Good, also called Second Generation Fire. And then we had a featured article by Edmund T. That is under our college hacking page on our website. You can check that out, where he talks about how he saved his son 2 years of his life and $18,000 by focusing on dual enrollment. And then to come soon will be that college hacking, the FAFSA hacking tutorial by Sunwoo, and we'll let y'all know when he releases that. Okay, pillar number 7. Now, this is one that is very unique to the FI community, and in fact, I think it's what puts us at odds with, the Dave Ramsey crowd. And this is the joy we get from travel rewards, the pure joy that we get from traveling the world for free. So you have this entire army of people, and maybe rightly so, that say that credit cards are the devil, and you should cut them up, and they are ruining lives. And, actually, that's probably true. I don't really take issue with that. That is true. They are dangerous. But our audience is a different audience. We're already doing all the math on everything. We're already, for other reasons, not because we have the self-control. We've demonstrated that. We're pursuing other things. We're not just purchasing stuff just to purchase it. We're already talking about what's the value of something and how is this holding me from getting back to my financial future. And so once you're debt-free and living far below your income, all that stuff about credit cards goes out the window. And now we can actually start to look at credit cards as a tool that we can use to literally travel the world for free. And it's a completely different conversation. So Dave Ramsey can be 100% right and 100% wrong at the same time, depending on the audience that he's talking to. Many people need to cut up their credit cards. I don't deny that. I know who those people are. I probably would be in danger of being one of those people at some point in my life if I didn't see what the other side looked like. But I'm pursuing FI, and I organize my life in a way to make FI possible. And in that construct that I've created, credit cards are a tool that I can use to literally take my wife to Italy for free next year if I want and spend a week there, and I don't have to spend anything extra for it. It is a way that I can go and visit my in-laws in Zimbabwe and Africa. I can go to Cape Town. It's a way that I can take my family afford to Disney World for free. It turns something that could otherwise be stressful into a game that I can play, and I can only do it because I'm in the FIRE community and because I know these tools. I know about these life hacks that allow me to do that, allow me to leverage it. And that's something that honestly, that's something that Brad taught me. He was the one that finally got me in on this fun game. And so I'll forever be grateful to him for that. And at the same time, I'm incredibly excited that that's something that now we can share with you, our audience, and that y'all can benefit from it as well.
Yeah, and that's how we met, actually, right? You heard me on the Mad Finances podcast and realized I was in Richmond, and yeah, we met up for a burger for lunch, and the rest is history. Now we have this podcast, so that's a pretty cool backstory,
Yeah.
But you're unquestionably right. I mean, Dave Ramsey, his advice, honestly, is good for many more people than our advice is good for in this realm of credit cards. Credit cards are dangerous for many people, but for people who are listening to this and people who are pursuing FI, Jonathan is exactly right. I mean, we are clearly beyond those, day-to-day, month-to-month concerns of not paying our credit card. Right. So that's like the very first rule of pursuing travel rewards points is do you pay your credit card on time and in full every month? If you do, which I'm sure all of you out there do, then this is something that can really juice your credit card rewards from like the normal like piddly little 1% to 15, 20, 30%. I mean, that's essentially a rebate on every dollar you're spending in life that you funnel onto your credit card. I mean, when you think about it like that, that is a very powerful concept. So that is why we include travel rewards in our pillars of FI.
All right, pillar number 8, cut the cord. And I love this one because this is one that Brad hasn't done yet. I'm working on him. He's going to do it soon, hopefully. But cut the cable cord. This is a generation that, you're living in a time where there are a million ways to get your necessary, needed information, such as quote unquote news, and also a way for you to get your entertainment that does not involve paying $150 a month to a cable company for the privilege of them pumping commercials into your home all day long. And if you can just immediately chop $150 a month from your budget just by getting rid of the garbage that's being pumped onto your TV, then you should do it. Take control of the media that's in your home, and instead of watching whatever comes on the TV, watch what you actually want to, a la carte via channels such as Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu or any number of things like the Roku. Watch what you want to watch. Don't pay for everything just to get that tiny little fraction. It's an awesome play, and I think that everyone should consider whether or not that's something that they can do. And it makes a big impact over your 20 or 30 year investing financial outlook. It's kind of one of the ones that we put at the end because it seems like a small thing, but it's the small things when you add them together that add up. So number 8, cut the cord.
Yeah, totally agreed. And yeah, again, this is, while it sounds like small fries, as far as actual dollar figures, it's still in most cases $100 a month. And when added up over years and decades and compounded, those are big, big dollars. So, and it's also like a larger look at life, which is, as Jonathan kind of alluded to, like, don't just sit back passively and, sit on a couch for hours a day and do nothing. Like that's not what our lives are about. So why would we spend our resources on expensive cable packages? It just doesn't make any sense. And, just to kind of jokingly follow up to what Jonathan said, we essentially did try to cut the cord, and we're basically paying now like $25 a month for what the cable company threw at us, which is pretty significant stuff. Nice. So I don't feel too bad about it at this point.
You're saying after our episode, you called them up?
After our episode, I looked into it a little further and realized that I was not paying quite as much as I thought I was, honestly, and that what they're giving us was a value judgment for
$25 a month is great. And does that include your internet?
We thought it was
as well?
worthwhile, because the funny thing was we actually went to them with the intention originally of cutting the cord. That was our intention. And, we realized that, as you said, like the internet package was either $45 or $50 a month. And, they gave us this ridiculous package for just under $80 a month for, all in. So that was something we determined, especially with our kids, and that it made sense to spend that, sub $30 on that cable. But, it's something that we are definitely going to contemplate cutting at some point in the future, just because we really don't watch that much TV. So once our kids get a little bit older, that'll go. But at least it was intentional. And I think from the larger standpoint, like that intentionality is what's so important about FI and like how we value our money, right? Like everyone values their money differently and chooses to spend it in different ways. But as long as it's intentional and there's some thought behind it, that's okay with me. So that's where I come from.
No, that makes sense. All right. And then not finally, but number 9, pillar number 9, cheap cell phones.
Yeah, this is very similar to number 8. And I guess, we theoretically could have packaged it together with number 8, but it's cool that you separated it, because, I think a lot of people do just spend a ton of money on their cell phones. I mean, I know, what's normal for a couple, Jonathan, like $150, $200 a month.
Definitely.
Is that reasonable?
For sure.
And, and again, it's just not thinking differently or making those tiny little hard choices that are going to give you disproportionate benefit. And this is why I like this actually as a standalone pillar personally, is because it illustrates that, right? So you can get unlimited data and just, stream movies from, your car going down the highway, like, do all sorts of, wacky stuff because, hey, you have a cell phone, you deserve it, right? Like that, said sarcastically, right? Like that's just the normal American mantra is, hey, I pay for it. I'll pay for whatever I need to get every little bit of access. And, I choose to look at cell phones in particular just as that hard choice that makes for an easy life. So, I mean, my cell phone bill is about, depending on the month, $12 to $16 a month. And that's through Republic Wireless. And, I use it more than I feel like I should. Like I check my Facebook and check email and all this other stuff, when I'm out of the house, and it just doesn't amount to that much data because I'm smart about it. I'm not streaming videos when I'm out. I'm just doing the tiny little thing that makes a tiny, tiny little hard choice, but that saves me 90% on my cell phone bill. So for me, that's a decision that's well worth making.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so pillar number 10. Pillar number 10 is probably the most important out of all of these pillars, and it's the one that we're going to go into the least detail about, partially for the sake of time and partially because when we do go into depth, we want to make sure we do it the right way. This is one that most of these other budgeting type pillars are based on, and that is the 4% rule. Brad, do you want to just introduce that concept for us?
Sure. So the 4% rule, as Jonathan said, is really the underpinning of the entire concept of financial independence. It helps us calculate the amount of money we need to save in our total net worth between our retirement accounts and our taxable investments. So ultimately what the concept is, and as Jonathan mentioned, this is far, far beyond the confines of one pillar here. So we're going to do a very in-depth episode on this. But the concept is you can withdraw 4% of your total funds every single year as a, quote, safe withdrawal rate. And what that means, so your money, as we've always assumed, and this is, of course, a very, very broad generalization, but your money is going to grow at an approximate rate of 8% compounded annually. And if you can withdraw 4% of your total assets every single year to live off of, in theory, that money will last forever. It will last in perpetuity. And there are lots of articles on this. We're going to link to a couple of these in the show notes from Go Curry Cracker and from J.L. Collins and Mr. Money Mustache. And evidently there was a study done called the Trinity Study. And they looked at 84-year study period and the possible retirement periods and the percentage success rate after 30 years during this study. So they looked at essentially every single option, and they did, there's a great table here in the Go Curry Cracker article that I'm looking at now. They have a different section with if you had 100% stocks, if you had 75% stocks, 25% bonds, 50-50, 25 stocks, 75 bonds, and 100% bonds. So essentially, I'm looking here at the 4% withdrawal column, and if you had 100% stocks, there's a 98% chance that money will last you 30 years if you withdraw 4%. There's a 100% chance that if you had 75% stocks and 25% bonds, which is interestingly, that's what Jim Collins mentioned is his allocation. So that is 100% likelihood of that money lasting you 30 years. And you can see the schedule here on the article, and we will link to it in the show notes. So that's really the concept. When we talk about, what is your FI number? It's your annual expenses multiplied by 25. It's as simple as that. That covers the 4% rule. So just looking at the math, it's multiplied or divided essentially. So if you had $1 million, multiplied that by 4%, that is $40,000. Okay. So that's the amount you would need to live on, and turned around mathematically, it's 40,000 multiplied by 25 is the same $1 million. So, that's the number that we're looking at. Honestly, like some people might not be 100% comfortable with that. As I've mentioned, many, many times on the podcast, I'm a little more conservative with my money. I wouldn't up and retire or up and consider myself financially independent the second I hit 4%. For me, I would probably be a little bit on the conservative side, 3.5%, even 3% withdrawal. And, that then is going to make it as close to a certainty as humanly possible that that's going to last me forever. So that's something I feel comfortable with. But, to each his own, obviously. It's, the math says there's a real high likelihood, to the tune of 98 to 100% that this money is going to last you for 30 years based on the Trinity studies. So, Jonathan, I'll throw it over to you for any thoughts.
Yeah, I've been itching to take a stab at this one. First of all, there's another word that we use for the 4% rule. It's sometimes called the safe withdrawal rate. That's just another way that we frame it. But it's a maximum rate at which you can spend your retirement savings so that you don't run out within your lifetime. Now, whether or not the safe withdrawal rate is 3% or 4% or 2%, for the sake of this particular conversation, it doesn't really matter. I feel pretty comfortable with the 4% rate, at least as a place to start. But what I love about having a number that you can work with when you're doing a case study is that you actually do have a realistic place that you can start. So, people say, well, how much do you need to retire? And then people out in the regular, average Joe will say, oh, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, $600,000. Like, what is that based on? It's not based on anything. And until I heard about the 4% rule or the safe withdrawal rate, that was just kind of, what I felt comfortable with. It was just saying a random number and hoping that was a good one, knowing without really knowing anything else. But this gives you a great framework. So when Brad and I do these case studies going forward, or we send these case studies off to other people to announce on the show. So like you send us what you would like for us to do as a case study and we start working on it. This is where we start. And then we can bend the curve up or down depending on what we want to do. But if you calculate your expenses out and it costs you your fixed expenses plus discretionary comes to 40 grand, then, that gives us a real easy number. We need to multiply that times 25 and we're at $1 million. Conversely, if you're at, 80 grand or 90 grand, that also gives us something that we can work on as well. And so that is the simplicity and the beauty of the 4% rule. The 3%, the 2% rule and all that other jazz, the math isn't quite as clean, right? It's just not as fun to work with. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but just for the sake of having a common baseline that we can start from, I love the 4% rule. And it's what Brad and I use when we're, running through our own personal case studies and when we're doing other people's. From there, you make adjustments, right, Brad?
Yep, without a doubt. And you really touched on the most important point, which is it's all about your expenses. Essentially nothing else matters. If you can keep those expenses under control, then financial independence looks a whole lot easier, right? At $30,000 a year of expenses, it's only $750,000 that you have to save up, which, sounds like a big number in theory, but as we've discussed on many of our case studies on our Friday roundups, you can amass that fairly quickly. At 10 to 15 years, based on a decent amount of savings, obviously, but it's very, very plausible. So it's all about keeping those expenses under control. And this hopefully was a good overview of the 4% rule.
So those are our 10 pillars, guys. I love those. I'm not necessarily saying that they are perfect, that there's not some room for some, honest discussion and some disagreement. I think you could maybe say travel hacking. Come on, guys. But guys, this is the FI community. We get to make the rules. And in the FI community, we freaking love travel hacking. So it's a pillar for us. You see it all across the board. Look at every single FI blogger that's out there. They're comfortable with this. We enjoy it. We enjoy talking about it. So I think it's reasonable to include it. And even if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that. The logic and the principles behind it where we game everything out and we look for wins where other people are hemorrhaging money. We look for ways to win. I think that is essentially where our mindsets are at. And we put that particular, philosophy into everything else we do. So what is the philosophy? Brad, do you want to go and tackle that? How can we take all of those different pillars and turn all of that into one singular philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is something if people out there in the audience have been listening to us over these, 20 some odd podcasts, they know that I really try to take a step back and look at this as a life philosophy. And I think it's so important. And, I think there are a couple things that jump out to me right away, which is the first is unconventional thinking. And we've talked about this all throughout this particular episode and prior episodes. It's just thinking a little bit differently than the next guy. Just looking at spending and at life as just like a problem to solve with smart thinking. And like that to me is just so satisfying. It's living that same middle class lifestyle as everybody else, but getting wealthy while doing it and while everybody else is living paycheck to paycheck. So, I mean, like, that's just such a cool thing. And like, I think like I like to think about like my neighbors. My neighbors would never, ever in a million years know that we were any different or that we were saving, 50 to 75% of our income while everybody else is living paycheck to paycheck. They just wouldn't know because we look like every other family, right? But it's just these few unconventional choices that add up over the monthly budget and over the yearly budget and compounded over decades. And that's what it's the biggest thing. Like we've talked about many times, Jonathan, is maximizing the rules, right? It's just knowing the rules, again, being a little bit smarter and just intentional, right? And we've talked about this in many instances, like potentially the college hacking down the road is, if I can get college for free or pretty close to free for my two daughters just by knowing the rules and thinking about it 10 years in advance, that's something I'm absolutely thrilled about. And most people, unfortunately, have a tough time just getting through the day, right? Just regular people are just worried about what they're going to put on the table for dinner that night, or when they're going to have time to do the laundry or something minuscule like that. And that again comes back to just not planning, right? And it's just being a little bit smarter, like not worrying about the mundane stuff, but worrying about trying to figure out life a little bit better. And maximizing the rules is really one of those main pillars in my estimation. And my final thing, and I'll throw it over to Jonathan for his thoughts, is really patience. Jonathan kind of alluded to this in his intro, which kind of saying like that FI is easy but incredibly difficult. And like my take on that is there's nothing incredibly difficult about this, but I think he hit on something essential, which is this is incredibly difficult for most people because they don't have the patience to think about life more than this week, right? We in the FI community look at this as a 10 to 20 year journey to reach financial independence, true financial independence, where we control our lives for the forthcoming decades, multiple decades. And that's long-term thinking that unfortunately most people just don't have the ability to do, or it just hasn't crossed their plate, but hopefully everybody out there listening to this knows this is not a short thing. This is not a quick fix. This is, if you can be smart over a period of 10, 15, 20 years, you can take control of your entire life. So that's my final word on the pillars of FI. And Jonathan, I'd love to hear what your closing thoughts are.
Yeah. Okay. So mine is, these are all such, some of them may have seemed larger, some of them may have seemed smaller, but why do the small ones matter? The reason is because these are going to be implemented consistently over the next 20 years for you. So basically the easiest way to look at it, for every $100 that you can slice from your budget, from the end of your budget each month. So, when we talk about going from $150 down to $50 a month on your cell phone bill, that's $100 a month that you've just saved right there. Over 20 years, if you invest the difference, and that's the key, whenever we talk about you finding a way to reduce the cost of your lifestyle, usually the difference is not being spent on frivolous stuff. That's a way for us to increase our savings rate and to get it back into pillar number one, which was low cost index fund investing. Now, you could make the play and put it into a side hustle. You could maybe start a rental real estate business. You start a side hustle, but assuming that you're just focused on low cost index fund investing, that's good enough. That's more than good enough. That's probably one of your best options for the guaranteed path to wealth. For every $100 a month that you cut from your budget, that's going to be $60,000 in 20 years. And not only is that $60,000 that you're going to have, but you're going to need $1,200 a year less in expenses. I mean, that's the double. That's the double power of you slashing that from your budget. So we just went through 10 things. Now, some of those, every single one of those will save you a minimum of $100 a month. So that's $60,000, at the end of that 20-year period. Each individual ones, but some of those are worth way more than that. Not starting out with $40,000 worth of debt, that's probably a multiple $100,000 decision right there. Getting an affordable housing instead of the McMansion, that's going to be $1 million decision right there. Every single one of those adds up to a number that's almost incomprehensible. So our final thing is just math everything, right? Just understand the math and then make the value choice. And the small decisions matter too. Those ones at the end, they do make a difference. And so that's just a nice little general rule of thumb. If you can slash $100 a month from your budget and you invest the difference 20 years later, that's $60,000. It's a big deal. The small stuff does matter. So anyways, I hope that y'all enjoyed this. This is a high level stuff. If you want more information about any one of those levers that we talked about, we have started to really dive into it, and we made a special effort to tell you what episode that was in. So depending on where you're at on this journey, you should consider going back to those other episodes. And we talked more about the cell phone on episode 20 and also the cable on episode 20. And then one other thing that we didn't mention today was insurance. We also talked a little bit about that in episode 20, and we're going to have another episode coming up in the somewhat near future about it as well. So that's it. Those are the pillars of FI, and all those small details matter. And if you implement them just one at a time, you don't have to do everything tomorrow, but if you do them one at a time, you are going to retire incredibly wealthy, and you're going to retire decades in front of your peers. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.